Welcome back, everyone, to another episode on Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and the goal of the show is really simple: to learn from those who have mastered their craft of what they do. If you're new to my show, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. Today, I am joined again by Andy Schectman, president and owner of Miles Franklin Precious Metals. So, Andy, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you here.
Hey, great to be back, brother. Thanks for having me, and it's been too long. So looking forward to being here.
So, Andy, it's great to have you here. How has the US contributed to its own decline more than the external enemies?
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because I think I use that actual phrase something to the extent that the US has done more to destroy itself than any external enemy could have ever done over the last few years. I think you could argue it's been done in many ways. I mean, the one that I focused on the most in years past would have been things like the weaponizing of the dollar, the weaponizing of the treasury market. It's one thing to sanction, which is bad enough as the world reserve currency. It's not our prerogative to do that, right? This is for world opinion. And when much of the Southern Hemisphere would say that we are hypocritical, where we can invade Iraq 20 years ago under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, say, sorry, we didn't find any, topple their government, install a new regime. We're still there 20 years later, sanctioning 14 of their banks for trying to buy liquid natural gas and through an Iranian intermediary bank system. And they made $90 billion in oil revenue last year that we control. They're not even allowed to control their own natural resource proceeds. Asked us for $1 billion towards the end of the year. We said, not a good time right now. Get back to us later. And so what have they done? They have formally joined the BRICS. They have are in the process of kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. There are no green bills in any denomination in any of the banks since January 1st. And if you own a business and trade in dollars, you'll go to prison and your business will be taken. The world views us, much of it, as being hypocritical. So when Janet Yellen gives an interview with CNN and says, listen, we know that talking to China in essence. So listen, China, we're okay with you being friends with Russia. And my initial reaction was, well, that's really nice of you, Madam Secretary. Very benevolent. Thank you for letting us be friends. But she said, if you give one penny to the Russian war machine, we will sanction your banks, your companies, and Beijing itself. The hypocrisy of that statement, where we can give $200 billion to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight, but if they give a penny to Russia, their ally, that's a problem. And now it's crossed from stupidity to ridiculousness. And that is, now they're talking about there's roughly 280 or 90 billion in assets, of which only 5 are in the United States. They want to confiscate that 5 billion and give it to the Ukraine in the form of weapons. The 280 or so billion in the European Union, they are talking about, at least at first, there's all sorts of things they're talking about. And I think the meeting is in just a few days in, I want to say in Italy, but they're talking about at first taking the interest of that 280 billion, which amounts to a few $1 billion a year of these frozen Russian treasuries and assets, and giving it to the Ukraine. So when you weaponize, yeah, that's bad enough. When you steal, it's a whole nother line. And then you steal and give to the foe of the country that they're fighting against. It's a whole different level of stupidity. So when you talk about signing an executive order to go green, weaponizing the dollar, stealing Russian assets from a country that is perceived from the Southern Hemisphere as being hypocritical, it's a big problem. But if we had our shit together here at home, why then it might be okay. But open borders where 17 million people have entered illegally, if 1% of those people want to do harm, that's 170,000 people. If 5% want to do harm to the United States in any capacity, where you have people in Dearborn, Michigan saying death to the United States, but 5% of 17 million is what? 850,000 people. That's bigger than any standing army. And the lawlessness in the cities, the wokeness, the cancel culture, where if we don't agree, you'll forget it. I don't want to hear what you have to say. No open dialogue. The questions surrounding the judicial system. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. What's happening to Trump and what's happening to Biden are not the same. And it's deplorable. When talk about the questions surrounding the integrity of the electoral system, these are the things that made this country great. Kids in America don't even say Pledge of Allegiance anymore. Kids in America don't celebrate Halloween in school because it offends some people. There are all of these things that made America special, where I don't care if you're religious or not, the saying one nation under God. I think that's why they took the pledge of the allegiance out of every morning in elementary school. That's what we said. And the breakaway from the nuclear family, the relationship with religion, the just the destruction of all of the things that made America special, in particular the judicial system, the electoral system, and the immigration system. It was an honor to earn your citizenship. A person right across the street from me, they're from Montreal, right across the street right there. They just got their citizenship and they were so proud about it. And I can't help but feel I felt it was dirty for them. Like I felt bad for them. Like we all kind of had like a cocktail party in their honor because they became American citizens. And we think about, within 30 seconds, people were joking. All you had to do was go across the Rio Grande. You wouldn't have to go through all this shit. Well, but that's the point. We are so far divergent from what America stands for, hopefully, that I think that is the big macro trend, whether it be destabilization of the dollar geopolitically and our image, or what's happened here. Little boys and girls who grew up around the world wanted to wear Levi's jeans and watch Hollywood movies and listen to rock and roll and come here to be part of freedom and liberty and justice. People walked from Central America, not here recently where they're invading, but walked there before or tied rafts together with strings to float here from Cuba for liberty, for justice, for freedom. And these things just seem to be kind of thrown to the wind. And so, yeah, I wish I wasn't so pessimistic, but I really, Ben, I think there's a fine line, man, between pessimism and realism these days. And this is not lost on the rest of the world. And I think people need to understand that things are changing as a result of the actions of our leaders who just seem to be doing all of the wrong things. I'm giving a speech too down here in Boca in a month at Rick Rule's conference. And the title of my first speech, I wanted it to say, "Is it too stupid to be stupid?" My wife thought that was a little harsh, so I'm changing it to something like, "Is it too ridiculous to not be planned?" And I think in many respects, it just seems to be too stupid to not be planned.
And why do you think that is? Because I think it's pretty important right now. Sometimes it's easy to just hope for the best or follow mainstream news. So why do you think there is that even idea of like stupidity?
Because I think that there are two choices typically. That's what people would say. There are two choices. Look, let's just quantify things first. We're a country that has nearly a $35 trillion debt. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. I just read something and I wrote it down here because it kind of struck me. And about how big this number really is. I mean, 31,688 years ago is pretty big in a trillion seconds, but the debt at $34.7 trillion, if you laid dollar bills, how thin is a dollar bill? If you laid them end to end, it would wrap around the earth 134,599 times. That's enough to travel to the sun and back 17 times. That's just the 34.7 trillion. But we have unfunded liabilities, all owed to the American people, by the way, which kind of fits into my ideology, my theme, and that is Medicare, Medicaid. Medicare Part B is $99 trillion underfunded, 99 trillion. Medicare Part D, the prescription, 22 trillion. Social Security, 77 trillion. Government military pensions, all owed to us, works out to 160 or 170 trillion dollars or 200 trillion in debt, right? The numbers are too big to ever be paid back. But I find it interesting that the majority of the debt is owed to us because as China and Japan and Russia and Saudi Arabia and all of these countries are shedding US treasuries, who's been buying them in large part? It's us. The hedge funds, the money markets, the mutual funds, the people chasing yield have been buying the treasuries as central banks have been selling and buying gold and commodities. And you can look at a graph of the Chinese acquisition of gold versus their divestment of treasuries, and it's like this. And this is the rest of the world. They're selling treasuries and buying gold because not only has gold outperformed the treasury market, it has no counterparty liability. It can't be sanctioned or confiscated from a foreign nation the way that treasuries have. We've proven treasuries can if we do not align ideologically. Well, we're going to take it from you, let alone inflate it away. And so when you look at a debt burden the way that we have, my mentor, Richard Russell, God bless his soul, used to say, 15, 20 years ago, the Fed, when we only had a 15 to $17 trillion debt, that the Fed was trapped and they had two choices: inflate or default, inflate or die, he always used to say. And I would say that there's a third choice, and that is to find a villain, and that is Xi Jinping and OPEC and Putin, to incentivize the world to move away from the dollar by allowing these countries to unite under the BRICS flag, by pushing OPEC away, by signing executive order to go green. And it aligns with Jared Bernstein's ideological views. Jared Bernstein, I'm sure many people have seen this guy's ridiculous interview that they were showing snippets of it on Twitter, where he was trying to explain how the bond market works, how the Treasury sells bonds, how the government prints money. It was the most humiliating thing I've ever seen come out of the mouth of the lead economic advisor of the U.S. government. But if you go back and research him and title Jared Bernstein in the search bar, dethrone King Dollar, you'll find a report that he wrote. It was picked up by the New York Times, or statements he made to the Washington Post when Trump threw tariffs on China, asking or saying, good, maybe we'll lose the reserve status. His whole thesis is to lose the reserve status. It's a privilege we can no longer afford. So you have an executive order to go green when the linchpin of the dollar hegemony is our relationship with OPEC and Saudi Arabia. For them to for protection, they will value oil in dollars and recycle the excess in treasuries. Well, they are no longer selling oil just in dollars. You see these mutual deals, or these deals in local currencies amongst countries, where example, Saudi Arabia sells oil to China for yuan and it is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So, gold is now replacing the treasury bond, in my opinion, because it has no counterparty risk and has massively outperformed the bond market in the last since the beginning of the century. And the settlement outside of dollars chips away at the dollar hegemony, and the excess reserves not going into treasuries, in fact, being sold, going into gold, chips away at the reserve status. But why do it is a good question. Well, like I said, 200 trillion in debt. How do you ever pay it off? Well, you inflate, you default, or you find a villain. Those bastards did it to us. They dumped the dollar. How could they do it? And how many people know that gold is tier one? How many people know that Saudi Arabia signed a protection agreement with Russia, or that they've applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or joined the BRICS, or all of these things? How many people know it? Nobody. How many people know that it's the backing of the Saudi kingdom that gives the dollar its reserve status? Hardly anybody. The media doesn't just do a bad job, they do no job of telling us what's coming. So for them to point to this as a villainous act would work. And at the same time, who's all the debt owed to? Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions. That's us. How about all the treasuries? Who's been selling them? Them. Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, all of the countries are shedding treasuries, because not only has the treasury market been horribly performing over the last year and a half, as they raised rates 500 basis points in a very quick period of time after a decade-long plus of zero-bound federal funds rate, destroying the value of all those bonds in circulation that they hold, the 10-year treasury. But they can be confiscated now if we don't agree with you. Doesn't matter that, when Janet Yellen says to Russia, if you do 1 penny, we're going to confiscate it, but we can give billions. The hypocrisy is making the world say, screw it. They're an insolvent country, us. We are inflating away the dollar. We are destroying the value of the bond market. We are wholly hypocritical in terms of the way that we view the world and make rules. They're looking to gold and commodities, as Zoltan Pozsar says, as assets that have no counterparty risk, instead of opaque debt promises, which have a very small historical footprint in terms of being an asset from a country that can steal it from you. And so why would we do it? Well, how do you ever pay off that debt? And if all the debt is owed to us, as the treasuries are being sold, the American public is loading up on them, the hedge funds, the money markets, the mutual funds, the traders, the people chasing yield. The majority of all the debt is owed to us, including most of the treasury debt, maybe 20, 25% owed to the rest of the world. So if you did default, if you did incentivize the world to dump dollars, to move away from only accepting dollars for treasuries, then that's that bang, that all at once moment where everything collapses, as every country in the world's had to stockpile dollars for 50 years. Now, this gets into a very interesting point. And that synthetic demand, by the way, has created huge demand for the dollar, that if no one has to hold it, let alone wants to dump them, the inflationary impact is extraordinary as all those dollars rush home. The byproduct is increased interest rates, which everything in this world, from the banks to the insurance companies, to all the assets are inversely correlated to that. That's the Klaus Schwab moment when everyone dumps dollars, rates spike, and everything collapses, including the banks and the insurance companies. That's when the CBD comes into effect. And that's the number 2 economic advisor, Lael Brainerd, who has worked at the Fed, worked at the Treasury. If Biden were to win again, she will be the head of the Federal Reserve. She worked with the Boston Fed and MIT in development of a new CBDC that Biden fast-tracked. She fast-tracked and ran point for Fed Now, which is Venmo and Zelle on steroids backed by the Fed. That's being test piloted by a handful of banks. She's a modern monetary theorist. But the point is this, is that now you can blame someone. You can blame Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC for dumping the dollar, for creating the hyperinflation, for destroying the system, but have no fear because Lael Brainerd is here with their CBDC. Take it, and we too will make you whole as everything that you own is collapsed. Now is it hyperbole? Yeah, everything I said up until that moment is fact, but what happens if and when that happens? Well, that's a scary thing. I don't know that it will happen, but it sure seems like it is happening. And it's a whole hell of a lot easier to default on the American public than it is on the rest of the world, because all you got to do is take the CBDC and whatever you had will make you whole. And I know you had 5 million in your bank, but it's gone. And so is your bank. Take the CBDC and we'll even give you your insurance policies that are lost because the insurance companies blew up. And could that happen? I don't know. You tell me. The whole concept of modern monetary theory is to print. You print your way to prosperity. So, why not? Why not make it happen that way? How else can you describe when you say, why would it be too stupid? I mean, look at the things we have done. Not only have we destabilized our image around the world, we're telling the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, we're going green, even though it's called the petrodollar. We're weaponizing the dollar against all of these members of BRICS who are united together in a common union. And then we let our country fall apart, from the borders to the elections, to the inner cities, to the judicial system, to the nuclear family, to everything. It's like, where the hell are we? It's a bizarro world. And so it is, to me, too stupid to not be planned, because you inflate, you default, both roads lead to the same place, or you find a villain. And that villain allows you to move to the next system without falling on the sword for incredibly naive and irresponsible monetary policy and brain-dead fiscal policy. And instead, you have that villain to point to. And you know what? The American public largely would believe it and bite it and take it. And gladly accept the CBDC rather than starving to death, as would the people who said, I'll never take it. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But I have great disdain for the actions of our government and the road that they are leading us on. And it just, to me, who tries to live in a logical environment and think logically, everything that they are doing, instead of clinging to the privilege of being the world reserve and clinging to the privilege of having a free country that is proud of its judicial system, proud of its electoral system, proud of its immigration system, turn into a complete freaking mockery. So you think about it yourself. You tell me, does this sound like rational decisions that we are doing, or just seem too stupid? And are our politicians really that stupid, or are they just trying to find a villain? I'll leave that up to your listeners. But I am leaning towards a sign of it's too stupid to be stupid. And it's a cop-out is what it is. It's finding a villain, and that's what it appears to me.
I appreciate that thorough answer there, Andy. And, when you look at some parts of the world, like the eastern side of the world, there are individuals that understand what's going on and they kind of see through everything. But when it comes to the western side right now, it seems like we're kind of behind. So what is your fear right now about, the Western world not seeing the same views currently right now as the eastern side of the world?
Well, you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming, brother. And there's a theory called the Cloward-Piven theory. And I would encourage everyone to Google it and read about it. It's a very, very small read. I'll try to encapsulate it a little bit. Cloward and Piven are husband and wife, were husband and wife professors that taught in the 60s at Columbia University. It's interesting that Jared Bernstein, the lead economic advisor, went to Columbia University then, and he had a degree in music. He also has a master's degree in social work, by the way. This is our lead economic advisor, as did President Biden, as did Madeleine Albright, Bill Barr, Eric Holder, and the list goes on and on. All of these these politicians right now here or previous, Madeleine Albright, I think the former secretary of the UN, I mean, the very prominent positions were all indoctrinated with the Cloward-Piven theory, which in a few words or less, number one, you overwhelm the welfare system and the entitlement system. You overwhelm the inner cities. You overwhelm them with a whole slew of people that need welfare payments, and then you create a serfdom of people who will never vote Republican ever again. You overwhelm the system, which leads to universal basic income, and move away from the welfare system. You give universal basic income, you move to a socialist agenda. You elicit, to your point, why don't we see it, the left-leaning media, who is sympathetic to the plight of the underprivileged and the welfare system putting them at a disadvantage. And think about the left-leaning media doesn't tell us anything that's true, and all they act is divisive and creating a further wedge between what used to be united America. United States is no longer united. We are divided tremendously. And the cancel culture aspect of it, if you don't agree, well, kiss my butt, move away. That's how there are no more polite, open discussions where you learn about someone else's opinion and you grow as a result of it. You may not agree, but you learn. And now we don't even cross that bridge. So read the Cloward-Piven theory and you'll say, my God, maybe that's why 17 million people have come in and overwhelmed the inner cities, where 65% of all the taxpayer-sponsored subsidies or taxpayer-funded subsidies are going to people here illegally. Only 30% are for people, American citizens, who are in need of some form of taxpayer assistance, but welfare. But you are overwhelming a system, and that so much so where the Congressional Budget Office, which is one of the last nonpartisan groups in Washington, says by 2031, 100% of tax revenue will go just to pay the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement. That doesn't take into account all these people that have come into this country illegally. Millions and millions and millions and millions of them, anywhere between 12 and 17 million, depending upon who you listen to. And who's going to pay for their schooling, their food, their education, and their hospitalization? Who? How? Where? Where does it come from? We're broke. We're insolvent. We're 200 million in debt. I mean, and so could the Cloward-Piven theory that Obama learned and that Jared Bernstein learned, could it really be happening, or is it too stupid to be stupid? I don't know. You tell me. But are the cities, the inner cities, being overwhelmed? Yeah. Is the entitlement system being overwhelmed? Yeah. Is the left-leaning media helping to create divisiveness and not tell us both sides of the story? Yeah. And I mean, would these people, these 17 million plus people, would they ever vote for Trump when he's talking about deporting them and not giving them free handouts? Yeah. And so ask yourself, is this real? Don't know. You tell me. So again, fine line between conspiracy and reality, but if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and, well, it tastes like a duck, I think it's a duck. But that's just my own personal opinion. And look, man, this country has given me so many wonderful things, and I'm the least likely person to have ever succeeded in the level that I have. My parents were hippies, and we weren't privileged. When my dad and I started this company, a guy that had a degree in history and philosophy, we started this company in 1989 with a loan from a friend, Franklin and Miles Franklin. My dad's middle name is Miles. He lent us 60 grand. We started in an office the size of a closet. And we're at 10 billion in sales in 34 years. I thank God every day for this country and the opportunities it's given me. And this is why I get itchy and angry when I see what's happening to this wonderful country. We are destroying what it is to be American. We are destroying what it is to have a privilege of a free society with a judicial system that assumes innocence before guilt, and does it fairly, not two-tiered, where my wife and her family immigrated from Russia when she was 2 years old, legally, people across the street, legally, an immigration system that welcomes people the right way, where you assimilate and you contribute, not where you just walk in across the border. And when you see, how many thousands or millions of middle or young guys your age military age fighting men coming here, with Toomey bags and they didn't walk. Who flew them there? All this stuff. I mean, it's scary and it's disappointing. And this is and this shit ain't lost on the rest of the world, man. Especially the people who would consider us their foes. It's not lost on them. They see what's happening in this country, and they see it's being destabilized. It's no longer united. It's divided, and that's the first step in the Communist Manifesto: divide and conquer. I wish I weren't such a buzzkill, but I got 3 kids. My youngest is 17, and I'm afraid for the world she's growing up in all honesty. And I'm an optimist at heart. But when you look around and see this stuff, I mean, isn't it too stupid to not be planned? I don't know. You tell me, brother. I don't know. I wish I didn't feel that way.
What is it that you pass on to your kids about becoming financially sovereign?
Pay yourself first every single time you get paid. In fact, that's the best gift I have ever been given, ever. By the way, am I like out of the frame here? Or I'm not, am I? Because it's kind of, okay, good. Sorry, I don't mean to. This looks like the top of my head's cut off. When I started the company with my dad, I mean, I went to the University of Minnesota, wanted to be a baseball player. I tore up my knee, and that ended that. And I started with him as a 19-year-old kid. And he said to me, look, Andy, sorry, didn't mean to bump that. Your mom and I just sold our life insurance policies, and I just borrowed 60 grand from my best childhood friend to start this company. I will not let you make the same mistakes that I made in my life. And that is, there's one rule you will live by, and that is you will buy something, gold or silver, every 2 weeks when you get paid, or I'll fire you. Okay, cool. I can do that if that's the only one rule. I've owned this company outright for 2 decades. He's still alive. I talk to him 10 times a day, it seems. He ain't going to fire me anymore, but I've honored my promise to him, and I have bought something every 2 weeks for 34, going on 35 years. I have never missed a 2-week period. It is the finest, most wonderful, greatest gift my father has ever given me, ever. The best gift I've ever received. Learning how to get out of the rat race. Pay yourself first. Allow the laws of compounding to work for you rather than against you. Do not become a debt slave. Do not follow the Joneses and go into debt the way everyone else does, where 65% of America earning over $100,000 is paycheck to paycheck. Let the laws of compounding be your friend. Pay yourself first, whether it be a $10 bill in a jar, which probably isn't the best way with inflation, but it's better than nothing, or an ounce of silver, or whatever your means are to pay yourself first. That is number one, the most. I don't care if it's a Satoshi, a tiny little bit of Bitcoin, whatever it is that you save in every 2 weeks. It's like anything. You want to work out. I used to, when I played really competitive softball, into my 40s, all around North America and Canada and the US, I worked out like a fiend. I worked out every single day. I went to boot camp. I took creatine. I was huge. And I didn't get there easily. I worked out my ass off every single day and regimented about it. And I ate well. Or if you want to diet, you got to be regimented. You want to work on a relationship, you have to work on it constantly. The same thing is true here. You must be regimented. You must be disciplined. You must realize the laws of compounding are extraordinary. It's not just compounding of interest, it's compounding of time. And that's the most important thing I could ever tell people is to pay yourself first and become regimented and never accept an excuse. Never. You always pay yourself first. And even if it means buying 1 ounce of silver or $10 in a jar, I don't care. Every 2 weeks or every time you get paid or every time you can, you pay your future self first. And I look at what I've accumulated over 34 years. I can't believe it. And it's all through. It was painless because I didn't buy a lot every single time, but I became regimented, and now it's part of my daily and semi-weekly life. That to me is the best advice I can give anyone young. It is to understand that you're young now. I still feel like I'm 20 years old in my head. I can go hang with those guys and party and yeah, let's do it. But you wake up in the morning, I ain't 20 anymore. And that's the truth. And you wake up one morning and say, wow, where did all that time go? And how do I got 3 kids? One of them was 24 years old. How'd that happen? And, it goes fast. So pay yourself first and become disciplined and let the laws of compounding be your friend instead of everyone else being a debt subservient slave in one form or another, because we all feel it's our birthright to go into debt. Ain't the way to do it. And especially in an environment like this, where you could argue the economy is slowing down, and the ability to maintain and service that debt becomes harder and harder and harder. So that is the best gift my father's ever given me. And everyone who works for me, everyone, I tell them the same thing. This is a condition of employment. And every single person, and they've all been my best friends. I mean, well, not, they've all been dear friends. Everyone before they work for me. I've known them since childhood, just about everyone who works for me, literally. They were my friends. A lot of them had very distinguished careers in Wall Street and degrees from Wharton or Temple University, master's degree in business administration, all sorts of distinguished careers. But we had relationships before they came to work for me. These are people who were savvy and wealthy. And I said the same thing: you buy every 2 weeks or don't take this job. And every one of them has said to me, thank you, dude. Like, my goodness, it's unbelievable how fast you build something up when you're regimented and methodical. Best advice I could ever give anyone.
I appreciate that advice. And I've, heard you say that many times on other shows. And it made me think too, I had Alistair McLeod on a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned, gold is money and everything else is credit. Is there anything else about precious metals that you want to debunk that you feel is false?
That they are archaic relics of the past, that because they don't throw off interest, they shouldn't be owned. If we take a look at the S&P 500 since 2000 and add the dividend reinvested adjusted value or return, it's about 9%. Gold has averaged 9.5 to 9.9% compounding since 2000. Gold is the tortoise, not the hare. Gold will retain its purchasing power even in an environment of where the interest rates or the interest earned on your S&P 500 have been reinvested for the better part of 25 years. It's one of these deals where, even if you go back to 1960, I'll try to do this off the top of my head. 1960, gold was $39 an ounce, and an average house, according to the Census Bureau, was 17,000. I think it's 435 if we divide that out. Let me see, 17,000 divided by 430, divided by 39 is 435. So, your grandparents are sitting around in 1960, or your parents are sitting around in 1960 or whatever, and they're thinking, well, grandpa left us this gold. I want to buy a house. And just goes to show how the value of the dollar in 1960, $17,000, according to the Census Bureau, bought an average house. And, so should we spend the 435 ounces grandpa left us, or should we take out a mortgage? Well, let's take out a mortgage. We'll save the gold for Ben when he's our future son, Ben, or our future grandson, Ben. We'll save it for him. And so they put that gold under their mattress, where for the last 64 years, it's been earning nothing but dust and no interest on that. And so we fast forward. And so today, the average price, well, let's just ask Siri. Siri, what is the average price of a house in the United States? $391,000 in 2020. It reached $543 in 2022. I bet it's a little less than that, but because this thing Siri's a little off here. But she says in 2023 it was $500,000 roughly in 2023. So let's use $500,000. Okay, so if we take $500,000 and gold today at 2355, so 500,000 divided by 2355 is 212 ounces. But remember, we were talking 435 ounces. So that gold sitting under your parents' or grandparents' mattress for 60 plus years, earning nothing, has kept pace with inflation so much so that it, in fact, buys you over 2 houses right now, not just one. And, when you talk about what that $17,000 would have bought you instead, it doesn't even buy you a couch and a TV. And, the point of it is that it keeps pace with inflation. And that's really what the misconception is that because it doesn't throw off a yield, it's not worthy of owning. In the past decade, these negative yields that we've been seeing sure beats the hell out of that. But I will just simply say that it has proven, since going all the way back to Roman times, or you go all the way back to the 1930s, way back then. And this $20 gold piece right here, which is basically an ounce of gold, it's 97 hundredths of an ounce of gold or just over that. It would have bought you in 1900, it would have bought you a suit and a tie and an overcoat for $20 and a very nice one, shoes, the whole 9 yards. Well, what does that $20 buy you today? Not even a pair of socks, but that ounce of gold, that's going to buy you one hell of a nice suit and an overcoat and shoes because it's $2,500. So when we talk about what gold doesn't do anything. Gold just sits there. It's the value of the currency depreciating that makes gold look higher. Gold is on the ledge of the bathtub, never moving. It's the water underneath it that is its value is decreasing as it's inflating and decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. So as the currency decreases, the GI Bill, when the World War II vets came home, their life insurance policy was $10,000. When my dad graduated college in 1963, his dream was to have a job that paid $10,000. A 1973 Corvette that he bought, a brand new Corvette Stingray in 1973, was just under $6,000. Now it's $130,000. So it's not gold that's been going higher. It's that the dollar has been losing value. So the interest that it doesn't throw off isn't the issue at all. In fact, what it is, it's just proven throughout all of time to retain, and in some cases, like the house, accentuate and multiply your purchasing power in a fiat currency system. And that's a massive misconception.
There's a concern that I get a lot from my audience. They understand, the thesis for gold, but they're sometimes worried about, is the price manipulated?
It is 100% manipulated. It is thoroughly manipulated, and it has been for a long time. Through rehypothecation. The London Metals Exchange trades right now, according to their numbers, they'll tell you they're trading 20 million ounces of gold per day. But they've admitted recently that the numbers that they publish are 10 times under the actual real volume, because if I sell 10 contracts and buy 5, the net result is 5. That's all they post. They don't say that I did 15, which would mean they're trading 200 million ounces of gold per day, right? That's ridiculous. They're trading, using those same numbers, 2.9 billion ounces of silver per day. These are all promises. These are all speculations. No one stands for delivery, but they are now. And what we see is China and Russia and India and Saudi Arabia. These countries in and of themselves in the past were not wealthy enough, smart enough, industrialized enough, connected or cohesive enough. Now they are united, and they are all standing for delivery. The only way that you can, and keep in mind, when you sell something naked short, like these banks are doing, where they're shorting thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of contracts naked, meaning there's no metal behind it, just that they know no one ever stands for delivery. No one typically did until a few years ago. Now there's a lot of say we'll stand for delivery. Thank you very much. Please give us our metal. The only way you can manipulate a market over an extended period of time, Ben, is to push it in the direction that it is going. And I would argue that the rest of the world has awoken, as Zoltan Pozsar calls this new system, Bretton Woods 3. Bretton Woods 1, when we took over for the pound sterling after World War II. Loosely, Bretton Woods 2 would have been when we became the petrodollar in 1974, 50 years ago this coming week. And there's a lot of talk about that being over this coming week. And John Little of the Substack's been talking about that they've already informed the West that they're not going to renew the contract. I don't know if that's true, but it was 50 years ago, and the Crown Prince did just come out and say China was our most important trading partner this year and for the next 50. Those are interesting words in that context, but the world is standing for delivery. Zoltan Pozsar says this is a new system that will be about commodities and transparency, not opaque debt promises. And if that really is the case, you cannot manipulate a market when everyone is standing for delivery. Back in the day, no one did. They wanted U.S. equities, U.S. real estate, U.S. treasuries. The United States was the place to invest, and it was safe, and it was prosperous, and it had opportunities. But everything good comes to an end. And I would argue the manipulation of the metals markets largely have been done because of the inverse correlation between real interest rates and the price of gold. The bottom line is this, dude. the market is manipulated and has been since the London gold pool and before, because what gold and silver are, they're not commodities. They are kryptonite to the Western system. And I just think that you can't manipulate a market when the whole world is moving in the other direction. So manipulation kind of fits into my logarithmic decay. It's ending little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once it ends. And I think it will end badly when these commodities are as rehypothecated, meaning resold over and over and over and over and over again, naked with nothing behind it. So if you don't have the metal to deliver, you're naked. And if all of a sudden you get the whole world saying, we want delivery, not just cash settlement, this isn't just a speculation, this is a play to accumulate. Look, these exchanges were never designed to be delivery mechanisms. They've turned into it. And that's going to make, that will spell the end, ultimately, of the manipulation. And when you have the whole Southern Hemisphere, over half the world, that is looking at commodities differently than they did. And now it's about physical possession of commodities, which carry what? No counterparty risk. And that's the whole key to the commodity acquisition by the BRICS and by all of the central banks. And it's just beginning.
It's very evident, if you look in the long-term view, things are extremely bullish for gold and silver. But if we look at the short-term view, and I know you don't have a crystal ball here, Andy, I'm not expecting that, but there are investors that are always concerned too with a short-term view. So where do you see gold and silver going for the rest of 2024?
I'm going to Vegas to see the Grateful Dead or Dead and Company here this weekend with some friends and my 3 kids. And if I had a crystal ball, I may not come back. I'd sit in the sports book and make a killing. But when people ask me short term, my brain kind of short circuits and I see nothing but fuzzy white. When I look at the big picture, ultimately higher than anyone thinks possible. And I mean that, higher than anyone thinks possible. The only thing that I can tell you in terms of an absolute that I have learned in 34 years of business, Ben, is that markets go higher to the upside than anyone thinks possible. And I'll say the Dow Jones, when I started in this industry, was 2,100. And the first conference I went to in 1990, the guy said it will go to 10,000. He was laughed off the stage. And conversely, markets will fall further than anyone ever thinks possible. When I started at the same time, the Nikkei was near 40,000, and Japan made anything with a motherboard or an engine way better than we did. They owned Rockefeller Center, Pebble Beach Golf Course, massive amounts of landmarks in the US. They were taking over the world from a financial standpoint, from an ingenuity standpoint, and a Honda and Toshiba and anything electronic or a vehicle or a motorcycle, they made better. And here we are 34 years later. Let's look at what the Nikkei is today. I know it touched its peak recently. It's back to 38,000. So it's real close to where it was 39, almost 40,000 in 1990. So here we are 34 years later, and it's after collapsing, it's taken all that time just to get back barely to where it was all that time ago. So I'll tell you simply this: the fundamentals for gold and silver are better than anything I've ever seen. And when all of the central banks in the world are buying it at a level the world has never seen, more than at any time in history, these people are not just the most well-funded, they're the most well-informed. They know the playbook. And in a system like a piece of glass or a drinking glass that's thrown against the wall and broken into 1,000 pieces, trust is a real hard thing to put back together. And I guess I would just simply say that what gold and silver represent are assets that inspire trust. And the Bank of International Settlements would not have reclassified gold as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset if they didn't have big things in store for it. And then when you put into context that India, for example, just bought 1.5 times the amount of gold that they bought all of last year in the first 4 months of this year, and repatriated 100 tons from the Bank of England just the other day. You have central banks loading up on gold. They bought more silver in the first 4 months of the year than they did in all of 2023, and taking possession of it. You look at, let me just see the names of the countries here real quick, but In the COMEX recently, Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, Cameroon, Algeria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have all repatriated their gold from the New York Fed. These banks are repatriating their gold. They're accumulating it. It's the removal of trust and the accumulation of something that inspires trust. The removal of trustless in the respect that we don't trust you to hold our gold. We don't want your treasuries. We don't want your dollar. We want our gold and send it back. And that's why they're buying so much and they're repatriating so much. Dude, I think you ain't seen nothing yet. It will go higher than anyone thinks possible, but little by little by little, and then all at once. And the logarithmic decay fits so many things these days. That's one of them.
Is there any last little bit of, piece of advice that you'd recommend for millennial investors?
Trust your gut, pay yourself first, get out of debt, start getting out of debt, and don't become the Joneses, and do the best you can to remember that, the compounding of time and the compounding of interest are truly, they should be the eighth and ninth wonders of the world. Is that what it would be, or something along those lines? It's something that everyone should know. It should be the first thing that we're taught in junior high school. But for those that would like to reach out to me, they could send an email to info@milesfranklin with any questions that they heard here. If they would like a price list that we keep close to the vest, it will be as good or better than anywhere in North America, request it, or any questions that you have, info@milesfranklin. I'm always happy to engage people. I'd love to come back on your show, brother. We need to do this again. And I appreciate you having me, Ben, and definitely let's pick up where we left off, not too far down the road.
Well, Andy, thanks again for being here. Your knowledge is extremely appreciated, that we've learned a lot from people like you.
Keep doing what you're doing. And, a lot of people are going to owe you a debt of gratitude for opening their eyes. So privileged to be part of it. Look forward to doing it again with you real soon.